Outlaw Law is brought to you by Whitaker and Hamer, attorneys and counselors at law. Your law firm for life.
Welcome back to the Outlaw Lawyers. Josh Whitaker and Joe Hamer, Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm Managing Partners. They host this program. They are practicing attorneys here in the great state of North Carolina. Today, Joe is on assignment, not feeling great, so we have Cassandra Nicholas and Taylor Scruggs-Smith, also attorneys at Whitaker and Hamer, joining Josh Whitaker in studio. I'm Morgan Patrick, consumer advocate. Reminder, Whitaker and Hamer offices in Raleigh, Garner, Clayton, Goldsboro, Fuquay-Varina, and Gastonia. And if you're facing a legal situation, if it's just kind of something that you need answers to, you can always call the firm, 800-659-1186. That's 800-659-1186. Leave your contact information, briefly what the call's about, and an attorney with Whitaker and Hamer will be in touch. Email your questions, as always, to the show, questions@theoutlawlawyer.com, and we will answer them on a future program. So, Josh, we go to Breonna Taylor.
Yeah, Breonna Taylor was a 20-something-year-old African-American female that was fatally shot in her apartment in Louisville roughly a year ago, give or take. And so there was a lot of stuff going on then. And there was all kinds of issues that came out of this, the legality of no-knock warrants, no-knock searches, and it led to a lot of discussions about how officers have to present evidence to get a warrant for something like that. We've talked about it a couple of times here on the show, no-knock warrants. Well, we'll start from the beginning. What is a no-knock warrant, a no-knock search?
So essentially a no-knock warrant is a warrant that allows the officers to kind of just go into the home like as soon as they get there. They don't have to announce themselves, or if they do, they only have to do it and wait 5 seconds or some small amount of time before they enter the home. So it's essentially a way to give the cops a way to just enter the home quickly. Most of the time there's a fear that if they announce themselves, evidence will be destroyed. So they're saying there's a fear that there's already weapons in the home, and if they hear cops, they'll just react. So it's a way to kind of, in a sense, catch people off guard legally and make sure that, evidence isn't destroyed and lives aren't lost in the serving of the warrant. Right.
So just practically speaking, the cops, the SWAT, whoever's going to serve this warrant, they're there in a group and they're ready to open the door with a ram or whatever they have, and they still have to announce that they're the police, but they do that very fast and then they're in. And I can't remember the gentleman's name, but it wasn't too long ago one of these was getting served. I think in maybe I can't remember where it is now. But we talked about it on the show because he's legally in his apartment, not doing anything wrong with his gun. And, the no-knock was served within seconds. Cops, I think it was within 9 seconds, cops were in his room, and he reacted much the same as I think anybody would. He drew his firearm and was shot and killed. And I think after the fact, it kind of comes out that he wasn't doing anything wrong. He wasn't really who they were after. He just was in his apartment legally with a gun and died, And so I think you've seen, especially after Miss Taylor's death here, you've seen a lot of states and municipalities just flat out say, hey, no knock, we're not doing it anymore. But that's not what we're really here to talk about. We're really here to talk about some things that have happened in her case. Just as a review, Taylor, so there was a no-knock warrant served. There was an exchange of gunfire. She was killed in that exchange of gunfire, and no officers have been charged at this point in her death. I think that's kind of a summation.
Yeah, so when the officers entered the home, her boyfriend was in the home. She was asleep in her bed, and boyfriend thought that it was somebody trying to break into the apartment. So, of course, took his gun and started to fire back at the officers, who fired as well. No cops were charged in connection with the actual killing of Breonna Taylor. A cop was charged under state laws for reckless endangerment for how many shots he did shoot at the time. But that was more reckless endangerment for the fact that it was an apartment building and others could have been harmed from the shots. I think he was ultimately found not guilty, but no other cops have actually been charged in connection with her death for the raid or anything like that.
And I do want to note that the warrant wasn't for her at all.
No, warrant was not for her at all. And that's kind of how these new charges have come up, is that Justice Department has been looking into this for, it sounds like, a very long time, reviewing all the evidence, and they have now found that evidence to suggest that that other cops that weren't involved in the actual execution of the warrant lied to get the warrant, that did affidavits and presented false information to secure the warrant for the home, knowing that what they were saying was false.
And so, I'm sure everybody kind of knows this, but just again, by way of review, law enforcement has to go to a judge, and every county and state municipality kind of has a different system. But basically, law enforcement's going to go to the judge and present their evidence and why they should get a warrant, why they should get a no-knock warrant or a regular search warrant or whatever it may be. And so the judge kind of looks at what's presented to him or her, and then will grant it. And that's when law enforcement can then go serve the warrant. And so here, Merrick Garland's department, I think they have been for a good year. I think they've been investigating the Louisville Police Department and this matter and specifically. But it sounds like some evidence was presented that Miss Taylor's boyfriend was living at the apartment and was getting packages shipped there. I didn't see if there was like an affidavit from a postal inspector, but that was part of the evidence, as a postal inspector confirmed that packages were going. And so I guess Merrick Garland's folks have decided that was made up, or at least there's no evidence of that whatsoever.
Right, because after the shooting, they did actually arrest the boyfriend, and then he was released rather quickly. Like, all charges against him were dismissed. So they're actually thinking they lied about it even being her boyfriend that was receiving the packages. Like, it may have legitimately been a crime they were looking into, but they lied about it even having anything to do with either of them. Because as far as I know, her boyfriend was never charged with anything and was released, even though he was detained and put in custody after the shooting. So, and just to add in too, like, this was during, like you said, this was during a crazy time with police interactions. So George Floyd was maybe 2 months after her.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Not too long. And then before her, it was Fidel Castro, or Castile, sorry. I always say his name wrong, but it was a couple of things going on. So a lot of people thought that this kind of got overshadowed by everything that happened after George Floyd. So the family's been fighting for her for about a year to make sure that this didn't get overlooked. The state actually ended up passing a Breonna Taylor law not too long after her shooting, though, that said essentially no more no-knock warrants were going to be allowed in that state.
Yeah, the no-knock stuff, I've always had a problem with that. You want to, it is a thin blue line. And so we certainly, here, I think is a good example. The feds, so the news this week is the feds charged 4 police officers who they thought were instrumental in not presenting evidence, maybe lying. I haven't seen the formal charges on obtaining this warrant. And none of the officers who actually were on the ground serving the warrant have been charged with anything, because I think Garland has a quote where he says they were, in their minds, they were executing a legal, nothing wrong with it
warrant. Yeah. So they're saying that everybody on the ground thought they had a legal warrant and nothing was wrong with it. But that the cops that introduced the evidence to the judge knew they were lying and were getting a false warrant, is what their allegations are. So that'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
Yeah, the argument for and against no-knock warrants, it seems essentially the same, because it's a danger if you announce yourselves as cops, if it's someone who actually would want to harm a cop. But if you don't announce yourself, you're also in danger because they think they're being, attacked, robbed, broken into their home. I don't know how to solve for that if getting rid of no-knock warrants really alleviates the risk of cops being hurt, harmed when they
And I wonder how
warrants.
this all ties into with warrantless searches. So for our listeners who may not know, there are searches that can happen that are without a warrant as long as there's probable cause. And some of those are the same reasons that we have no-knock warrants, which is
like exigent circumstances.
Yeah, destruction of evidence, fear of danger to others or yourself, like things like that can't allow a warrantless search. So the same reasons we have warrantless searches are the same reason these no-knocks are allowed. So like you said, it's a hard trying to find a balancing act between making sure somebody's not just going to shoot you because they think somebody's breaking into their home, but making sure the cops are, in a sense, safe and actually obtaining the evidence they need when trying to solve a crime. It's a hard pill.
It is, and I don't care who you are. I mean, if I go home today and someone busts down the door, I don't care if they say they're police or whatever. Your first thought is it's fight or flight. You're in an emergency situation. I don't know. It's like you said, it's a tough spot, and you can kind of understand it both ways depending on the facts or the situation that's before you. But either way, these guys have been charged, and I think something like this that has been in the news so much. When you have new developments, it's important to kind of go back and figure out exactly what has happened, not what you've just decided. Your mind's already absorbed information, and we have our understanding of it, and then we just kind of put it away. But as things develop, I think it's interesting to kind of go back and look at what's actually going on, I think there'll be more fallout. I think the Louisville Police Department will have more issues.
And I wonder if parallel state charges will follow, because it's interesting that these federal charges came first, that it's been over a year and there have not been state charges related to these. It's primarily civil rights violations that the Justice Department's going after. So,
and I think we'll see state charges probably if the Fed's crime is proven, because they lied to state officials to get the warrant. So I think we'll start to see more coming out of this.
Well, we'll talk about this again for sure.
Breonna Taylor, again, Noknock Warrants, talking about it on the Outlaw Lawyers. Josh Whitaker and Joe Hamer, your hosts, Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm, that are managing partners at the firm, also practicing attorneys here in North Carolina. And today, Josh is joined by Cassandra Nicholas and Taylor Scruggs-Smith, attorneys at Whitaker and Hamer. We've got more to discuss coming up on the other side.